Hello scholars, in today's session we will talk about SDG 13 and its global progress. In today's session we will learn about the main aims of SDG 13, target-wise progress made globally on SDG 13, the GHG patterns which are reported all across the world globally, and the pathway to mitigation and adaptation to the climate change. SDG 13, it talks about climate actions and it is concentrated towards taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. The main aims of SDG 13 are to increase adaptation and resilience towards climate related risks, integration of climate change into the policy framework of various nations, increasing the awareness related to climate change and related risks, and the SDG 13 also aims to build capacity for effective climate related management. SDG 13 has 5 targets and 8 indicators. Now we will talk about the progress made by each target, or now we will talk about the target wise progress made around the world. If we talk about target 13.1, which talks about strengthening the resilience and adaptive capacity to climate related hazards and natural disasters in all the countries. So if we see the number of deaths, missing persons due to disasters per 100,000 population, it has decreased from 1.64 in the decade of 2005 to 2015 to 0.86 in the decade of 2012 to 2021. However, there is a rise in number of persons which are affected by disasters per 100,000 of the population. It has increased from 1,198 persons in the decade of 2005 to 2015 to 2,113 in the decade of 2012 to 2021. The average disaster mortality stands at 47,337 people in 2015 to 2021. There is an increase in number of countries with national strategies for disaster risk reduction. It was reported to be 55 in the year 2015 and now they have increased to 126 in 2021. In total, 118 countries have reported policy coherence with 2030 agenda and the Paris Agreement. Now we will talk about the global progress made related to the target 13.2. The target 13.2, once again I like to mention here, it talks about integrating the climate change measures into the national policies, strategies and planning. If we talk about the indicators and how they have been achieved, the global average temperature, it has increased to 1.1 degrees centigrade. GHG emissions, because of the anthropogenic causes and activities, they are showing upward trajectory. Global emissions are set to increase by almost 14% over the current decade. Carbon dioxide levels, they have been reported to increase by at the rate of 149% higher than the pre-industrial levels. The projected cumulative future carbon dioxide emissions, they tend to exceed the total cumulative net carbon dioxide emissions. Now we will talk about the global progress they have been made regarding the target 13.3. Target 13.3 talks about improving education, awareness and human and institutional capacity regarding climate change mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction and early warning. If we talk about the progress made regarding to this target, 47% of the national curriculum frameworks of various countries, they do not mention about the climate change. In 2021, only 1/3 of the teachers they are capable of effectively explaining the phenomena of global warming and its effect on the planet Earth to the students. 70% of the young people in 2022 can only explain the broad principles related to the climate change. Now we will talk about the target 13.A. The target 13.A, it talks about implementing the commitment undertaken by developed countries parties to the UNFCCC to a goal of mobilizing jointly 100 billion annually by 2020 for mitigation actions and transparency on implementation. In 2020, 83.3 billion US dollars they have been mobilized to developing countries for climate mitigation by the developed nations. There is a 4% jump in this fund from 2019. However, adaptation finance is still lags behind with flows 5 to 10 times below the estimated needs. Now, according to IPCC estimates, 1.6 trillion US dollars to 3.8 trillion US dollars will be needed each year by 2015 for climate mitigation. The top 5 countries which have received the Green Climate Fund from the developed nations, they include Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Senegal and Mali. While among the developing countries, the top 5 nations which have received the Green Climate Fund are Mongolia, Costa Rica, India, Egypt and Indonesia. Now we will talk about the GHG emissions pattern which have been observed globally. It has been found that developmental pathway which has been undertaken by a country, it governs the structure of the economy. Simultaneously, it impacts the level of GHG emissions. The greater inequality in the society can lead to deterioration in environmental quality and can be associated with the higher GHG emissions. The various factors which determine the household consumption based emissions pattern include the household size, age, education, employment status, urban versus rural location and housing stock. Improving food production efficiency and shifting dietary choices, that means shifting to more plant-based product or having the vegetarian or vegan diet pattern, there can have the potential to reduce the global emissions of GHGs which are emanating from the agriculture sector. Now we will talk about the climate mitigation versus adaptation. These are the two terminologies which are very commonly referred to. Climate mitigation basically talks about reducing emissions and controlling the level of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. There are various techniques which can be adopted for mitigation of climate that include replacing the polluting fuels. For example, in place of using the coal, natural gas and also the petroleum products, they can shift over to the cleaner renewable technologies such as the solar energy and hydrogen. Then another terminology which is climate adaptation. Climate adaptation basically refers to adapting to the climate change that has already taken place or is expected. So in this scenario, basically we use there are many examples which we can refer to here. For example, using drought resistant crops in the agriculture sector is one of the example of climate adaptation, in which farmers they can shift over to drought resistant crops and can prevent the agriculture losses which are caused by the climate change. Second example of climate adaptation is recycling of water and effective water management in the fields and also in urban areas. Here we can recycle water for various purposes so that water can be conserved and the water insecurity can be reduced. Now we will talk about the various pathways through which we can adapt to and also mitigate the climate change. First is enabling technological and social innovations. We can promote some of the new innovations which are in technology field and also in the social engineering, so that we can fight with the climate change. Next is demotorization and decarbonization of transport, and this will lead to less amount of GHG emissions emanating from the transport sector, and this will help in combating the climate change. Increasing the share of renewable energy in the energy sector is another effective way of tackling the climate change. As we all know, our dependency on non-renewable fossil fuels, it is very high, specifically on the coal and the petroleum. If we switch over to the cleaner fuels and also to the renewable sources of energy, this forms a very effective way of tackling and also adapting. This forms a very effective way to combat the climate change, to mitigate the climate change. Enabling the use of smart grids, energy storage technologies, they are also form part and parcel of climate mitigation strategies. Investments in health, social security and risk sharing can also be beneficial in dealing with the climate change. Sustainable water management and water conservation, specifically in urban areas and also in agricultural sector, can effectively help in decreasing the water scarcity, tackling the water scarcity, and also help in adapting to the climate change. Investment in green infrastructure can also be a very effective tool and strategy to deal with the climate change. Governance consistent with limiting warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, that means conceptualizing various policies and including the global warming related policies into the policy framework of the country can help in fighting the global warming and climate change. In the end, let us sum up what we have learned in today's session. SDG 13 aims at taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. The number of deaths, missing persons due to disasters per 100,000 population has decreased in the decade of 2012 to 2021. However, the number of persons affected by disasters increased in this period. At present, 126 countries have national strategies for disaster risk reduction from climate change. Carbon dioxide levels in 2021 has increased to 149% as compared to the pre-industrial levels. 47% of the 100 national curriculum frameworks of various countries, they do not mention about the climate change phenomena. In 2020, around 83.3 billion US finance has been mobilized to developing countries for climate mitigation. Development pathway governs the structure of the economy and also the levels of GHG emissions. So these are some of the references. Thank you.